Last year, I installed wine caps into my garden space, and I am going to install some more this year, and I'm going to show you how I do it here in northern Alberta. Just an observation. Here, there was not any mushroom spores installed, and look at the size of these plants. But here, this way, there was last year, and look at the size of these plants. Just something to consider. Hey guys, so I just actually got some wine cap spores in. Do you remember last year I had, well, these mushrooms like that. These are the ones that I installed along the side of the greenhouse, and they are actually predatory mycelium. So what that means is that these spores, I don't know if I can show you this white stuff here. I don't know if it shows up on the camera, but that white stuff, that's mycelium. So basically that's the living fungi that likes to hunt nematodes in our soil. We have really bad nematodes in our soil that actually eat the roots of our plants. And so these guys actually eat those, and then they produce blooms, which are these wine cap mushrooms. And wine cap mushrooms are a lot like portobello. Is that how you say it? Portobello or portobello? Whatever. I don't have phonics today. Anyway, but that's what they're like, and they are a really good one. They dry really well. They freeze dry really well. I preserve these up all the time, and I use them in cooking all the time. They are really good. So I'm actually installing these in my greenhouse today. They grow in hardwood, so you need to have, the only hardwood we have that's native to us here is birch. Yeah, they like birch. They also eat hay and straw. I typically lean more towards hay because then it's not chemical treated. And they like cardboard, but if you have lots of nematodes, they'll eat those. So, but they do need shade and lots of water, and so they need a shady location. Oh, look, there's ashes falling. Anyway, distraction. Whoops. I'm having some moisture issues with this bed. I water it and it's not retaining any water. The water just goes through. So I'm gonna try to fix it, and I'm gonna show you how I do that. So basically, there's a lot of compost under the wood shavings, and I used cedar and leaf mulch in this bed. The leaf mulch works really good, but the cedar, it just seems to, like, everything's so dry. There is some moisture below, like if you dig really deep, but it's not holding any moisture. This was just watered. So, like, this was watered last night. So as you can tell, it's not holding any moisture. And this is my lily bed, some of my perennial lilies for one of my successions. And I had a ton of dieback and disease because the pest pressure is getting to them with not getting enough water. And the bugs are starting to sit on them, and I don't like that. So what I did, I just planted some stuff in here too, by the way, but so that's what that is. But what I did is I have just amended with some worm castings, and I'm also using just natural compost. I just picked up a cheaper bag, which not always recommended to go with the cheap stuff, but I'm just putting this on top of my mulch. I'm not even going to move the mulch. I'm putting it right on top of the mulch because I'm going to break this mulch down into compost and create I'm going to create basically a living compost is going to go on in here. So this is just a method that I found works the best for me in my climate. I've turned some soil around doing this before, and now stuff is thriving. So this is just something that I've learned works good for me. It may not work for you, but it works for me. So this is why I'm sharing what I'm doing. So I'm just kind of sprinkling stuff around. If it gets on the plants, just dust it off, and that's basically it. So now I need to go get some shavings, some hardwood shavings, and those hardwood shavings that I'm using today is birch, because that's the only hardwood that's native to me locally, and I have some because I've cut firewood, so we'll go get some of that. So I've been processing birch, firewood, and so this is basically birch wood chips or shavings from the firewood processor. So that's what I'm going to use as a layer in my amendments. So it's not completely birch. There is some spruce in here as well, but it'll work for now. And I'm going to use hay as a top dressing, because what I'm going to do, it eats hay. So I'll show you in a minute what I'm talking about. So I got some mushroom spores or mycelium, and I don't know if I can show you any live culture in the bag, but anyway, we're going to use this today. I should mention I'm in growing zone 2B, and these perennialized very, very well. They came back this year. I did do a check in my mulch and they survived. So basically, I'm just gonna dump some in here and level it out and create a layer, not a thick layer, just a very thin layer of shavings, just to get them going so they have something to start eating. And then I'll show you the next step. Now, if this wasn't like already a bed, if it was just on like garden soil or something, I would put cardboard down first and then put the shavings. But I'm not. Usually you wouldn't put fresh shavings on your garden beds, but I will show you why I'm doing this. I have these spread out over top of the compost I just laid down. Now, fresh shavings or fresh sawdust like this, it can lock up the nitrogen. And typically if I was applying this, I would put cardboard down so I could protect the plants from the fresh mulch of shavings, because they were harvested this winter. This wood was harvested this winter, or cut this winter, so these have not been broken down or aged at all. So they're quite fresh. That means that it can lock up the nitrogen in the soil, and that can be a problem for your plants. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way is because I can't really put cardboard down because I have plants that are still coming up, but there is a lot of nutrients underneath this layer of compost and the layer of fresh shavings. So what I'm wanting to do is I'm hoping that the plants start getting their nutrients from below, which has rich with worm castings because I had applied it and allowed it to soak through. So essentially, before I put the compost down, I put worm castings down and I soaked it, so the nutrients from the worm castings would have started to make a tea and go down deep into the rooting systems of this bed. Secondly, what I'm doing here is I applied this very thin layer of shavings so that I have something to feed the mycelium, which is the mushroom spores. And when these mushroom spores start to eat, they will begin to break it down, and then it'll release the nitrogen to the plants. So one of the reasons why I'm doing it this way, though, is because I'm using a top dressing of hay, because I don't like using a top dressing of straw, because all of our straw in our area typically has been sprayed with Roundup before harvest. So I don't want to use that because it will defeat the purpose of what I'm trying to do here. It'll kind of work backwards for me for what I'm doing. So I want to use a product that has not had any chemical spraying on it prior to harvesting it. So this will be what will protect the seeds from germinating from the hay that I'm going to top dress. They will starve out, and the plants underneath will have more nutrients available, so they'll be able to grow up, and also they'll be able to create shade for the wine caps, because this bed is out in the middle of my flower farm. So I need to be able to allow shade, which will be shaded by these plants. So in the winter, or fall, what I'll have to do is heavily mulch this with leaves, like a 6 to 12 inches of leaves, and pack that down on there to really give this a good amount of protection, because it is a raised bed. But I think it'll still survive and it'll thrive in this bed, because these will be very fast growing in the spring once this bed is retained some moisture. So that's how I'm doing it. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head. And if you haven't noticed, it is extremely smoky here today. I'm sniffling. I'm having a hard time breathing it, and it doesn't show up on the camera just how smoky it is, but the trees in our yard are a blur. It's really smoky. So this is the mycelium, and I'm just going to take chunks of it. This is a living culture. It's actually packed in hardwood shavings. It's nice and moist, and I'm just gonna sprinkle it on top in here, just like so. It smells like mushrooms. So, and this is what is, these little white things are what's going to eat these shavings and create wine, and like it'll create a healthier soil and help feed the food web in the soil microbiome by breaking some of the stuff down, hunting any nematodes that are in the soil that are bad for the plants, and then they will produce blooms, which are edible mushrooms. So that's what I'm doing. I also want to see how they do in like a barky area. So I'm gonna toss some in here. Just kind of threw them in there so they can eat this birch wood bark and the shavings that are under here. I'm just gonna kind of strategically throw them in here. I have a little extra, so it doesn't hurt to experiment, right? Just want to see how it does, what it does when you install them into stuff like this. Give it some shade. You never know until you try it, and I'm just interested to know how it will do. Get rid of some dandelions. Don't need those. Yeah. There is also, this is a broken down composted birch mulch. It's aged, and I kind of want to see how they'll do. I'm gonna install them on the shadier side of my dogwoods and see how they respond to this. Just to see if they do well. I'm just gonna throw a handful and then cover them up. I just have a little bit left, so it doesn't hurt, right, to give it a shot and see how they do. So I will keep you posted, and if you see me harvesting wine caps on this side of my garden, you'll know that this experiment worked. So the hay I'm using, it doesn't have a lot of seeds in it. It's like a grass hay. This is what we use for feeding horses. These particular bales were some that we couldn't use because it had, with the year, sometimes we have a year where there's different molds that develop that are toxic to horses, and it makes them get sick. So we couldn't use this, but it's still good hay. It's actually, this is 2 or 3 year old hay. I think it's 2-year-old hay. And so I've been saving it for projects like this to use it as a mulch so I can feed my mushroom spores. So as you can see, there's no seed heads, it's just grass. But if there is any seed heads, it should be protected and locked up by the fresh shavings so that they're not going to give them too much nitrogen to grow while those take over and shade them out. So that's my evil plan of attack on my combating my garden bed problem. Chickens trying to get on the deck. Oh man. Okay, so back to my garden. So this is what it looks like installed. It'll all push down and settle down. It looks kind of fluffy, and I will probably feed it more hay throughout the season. Maybe in the fall I'll give it a really good thick layer. But I just kind of mulched around my existing plants, and the other ones that haven't come up yet, they'll push through, and then we'll just have this nice bloom of mushrooms in here around these plants. So anyway, I think it'll work just fine. And I actually installed some as an experiment over here as well. I'm just gonna plop some of this hay on top because I have, this is like a mulched, like a wood mulch. Not a wood mulch, a leaf mulch. Oh my goodness. I leaf mulched this last fall. I put like 6 inches of leaves in this bed and like they're gone. Like they just go away. Oh look, I have asparagus. Nice. So as you can see, this is raspberries and they're getting really eaten up by bug pressure. So I think that the mushrooms will really help the microbiome in the soil so that it will help these raspberries get some pest resistance and natural immunity to pest pressure. The grasshoppers are awful this year. I don't know if you can see this guy right there. We've had several hatches of them. There's another variety. There's 2 different varieties. There's a tree variety and a ground variety of grasshoppers, and they're just killing my garden. So when you have healthy microbes in the soil, they actually have, the plants will have a resistance. So I did put some worm castings in here. Now I'm doing the leaf mulch as well that has some different beneficial things in it, as well as now the mushroom spores. So I'm hoping that this will create some more soil health in this bed, create more moisture retention, and create a strong, healthy immunity to pest pressure, and they won't get ate up so bad. Because I use these not only for eating, like raspberries, but we also use them for cut flowers. They're thornless. Some of these are thornless, and I use them for cut flowers. So for greenery, and I don't want, you can't use them for cut flowers when they look like that, and I don't use chemical. So we'll see how that goes. And so I'm just going to throw this where I installed that handful of spores, and we'll see how that helps. And I'll just water it in really well. I'm really glad that the asparagus is doing okay. I did plant more asparagus in here, so it hasn't come up yet, but it needs shade. It's too hot and dry. I decided I'm going to try installing them in my row here. I'm having an issue with some pathogens in my soil, and I was thinking that maybe if I could install the mycelium in this end of the greenhouse, it would help build the soil structure to combat some of the pest pressures, like or the diseases that we're getting, like Fusarium wilt that we're getting with the Lisianthus. I actually had some die back before I even brought it out, when I had it in the house still from it. It's everywhere in everything. Like it's just a big problem, that bacteria. So I'm hoping that I can balance it out by installing some mushrooms inside the greenhouse. There's shade cloth here, so it should be okay. I'm weeding, and I'm just tossing some of the weeds on here. I'm gonna go get some mulch and throw it down, and then I'll put hay down. So I'll try not to walk on this too much. Hopefully it'll start breaking it down over here, and then start moving into the beds where I do have some birch mulch, and I will have some leaf mulch going in here as well. So I'm hoping it will help. This up here is all birch shavings, so once it starts going, I'm hoping it'll make its way through the entire greenhouse and naturalize in here and just spread throughout. That's my goal. Will it happen? Don't know. So hopefully it will. But while I'm going by, goodness gracious, look how pretty the Queen Anne's lace is today. So lovely. Same with the yarrow. So for that installation, I am using fresh shavings as well. I don't want any seeds to germinate and grow in there, or any new weeds to come up. So I'm locking up the nitrogen in that spot until the mushrooms can do their thing and decompose this properly with this, get it into the food web. So that's sort of the plan right now, is to lock up in that alleyway, lock up nitrogen with using fresh shavings. If it was in a bed in here and I was direct sowing, I would do it with aged shavings. And that's all I'm using, not very much. So on this here, I do have a little bit of a different layering. Underneath, I have cardboard. This was done previously in a few weeks ago. But I laid cardboard down, and then I have aged mulch down with manure in it. It's just a compost that we made here using hardwood shavings. I installed the spores on the top, and then I'm just mulching over top with hay, and I'll soak it. We're supposed to get rain today, so I'm not really worried about soaking it. I'm gonna wait and see if we get a good rain, because obviously rain is better than from the hose, but I feel a sprinkle, so I'm gonna hustle and just spread hay. So as you can see, I'm just kind of going around the plants and just wherever I had this. The chickens are gonna come and scratch this and do all kinds of things, which it's a good thing. I want the chickens in my garden. That's why I have it netted off. Wherever I don't want them, I have it netting up. It's hard to see it, but on all my rows, I have netting that keeps the chickens from scratching the stuff that I don't want them to get into. So look at how smoky it is. It's hard to breathe right now. It is not even showing up on the camera of just how bad it actually is. The horses are really blurry in person, but you can see them pretty clear. On the video, it's much, much, much smokier in real life. So I want to get this done and get inside. So a few updates that have been happening. It's been super busy here because Chaz has been playing a lot of baseball and Tyson's been on fires. For those of you unaware, I am in northern Alberta and my husband is currently fighting fire. I've seen him a total of 7 times in the past 6 weeks, and he's been out in the bush quite a bit. This woman pilot right here, he said she's amazing, and I just wanted to note that it's a woman pilot and she's really, really good. But this was when they had a flare-up and they had to get back into the black, is what they call it. So what that means is they had to move themselves and their equipment into an area that had been burnt while the fire flared up around them and burned around them. Otherwise, they weren't safe. They had to, because it was a flare-up, and they had to wait it out in the black. They call that it getting hot. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that is out there working on these fires, and thank you to the families that support them. Baseball has had us going a lot. We're on the road a lot, and Chaz has been getting going with tournaments, and he has exam week coming up here, so it's been extremely busy. We've made some pretty substantial miles, and he's having the time of his life. So pretty proud of this little guy, and or big guy now. But anyway, go Reds. I wish I had more time this year to share all of the little things step by step of what's going on the farm, but I only have a few little moments to share with you, and I hope you enjoyed today's video and enjoyed seeing some of the things that I have to share. These are little clips of some of the stuff that has been blooming on the farm, and I hope you enjoyed seeing what's going on here in northern Alberta. I've just been growing and sketching and driving and doing all the things. By the way, the chicks are doing great. They moved outside, they learned what grass is, and they're growing really, really fast. Thanks for those that have been checking in and asking about them. Bye for now from northern Alberta, Canada.